I'm sure I've told you the story of Top Rank, no?
You're thinking of Top Gun.
Top Gun? That's not a jazz bar. That's one of your,
It's Tom Cruise's latest
experimental
venture.
face bars. That's a different
Scientology
project.
and jazz, the perfect combo. Welcome everyone. This is Tokyo Jazz Joints, episode 20. That seems significant somehow. I suppose we're halfway, James.
We're halfway. I would have thought that by now we would have reached 80 to 90% of what we had to say about all these jazz joints. Is there much more to go through? I'm not sure.
I'm going to suggest that maybe a lot of listeners probably think we've maybe even overstayed our welcome, but definitely reached 90% of what we have to say. We've still got national boundaries to explore. We've still got continents to open up to jazz joints. Come on.
Well, we're going to a wonderful part of the country today. We're going to what they call Kansai, the Kansai region, which encompasses 3 very famous cities and a bunch of rural prefectures. All our listeners outside Japan will obviously have heard of Osaka, Kyoto, and Kobe. And we're going to focus on just a couple places today in Osaka and Kobe. I think we mentioned Kyoto in a couple previous programs, but previous
and
episodes.
we did mention Kobe as well, because if you remember, I think
Java.
when we talked about
Yes.
Java, we were already in Kobe, so that should be familiar for people who've listened to that particular episode.
Yes.
So we're going to kick off today in a place called Jam Jam, which doesn't necessarily, to me, it's got more of a reggae feel, but it's very, very much a jazz place. And actually, we went to all of these places that we're going to be talking about today separately, and I'm not sure I've heard your experiences. So in another exciting first for Tokyo Jazz Joints, we may be revealing things that neither the we may be revealing things. We may be revealing things that each of the other doesn't know. Is that make sense? That's not English. That's not correct English, is it? We may be revealing things that each of us.
In case anyone wondered if the show was scripted, no, it's not. There's no script for this show.
How dare you? I've been working on that for minutes before this. So anyway, we went to Jam Jam. So the story with Jam Jam for me was very simple. I was down in Kobe, as I mentioned before, at some sort of professional development course for work. And after attending the sessions, I made a beeline for any of the jazz places that were in Kobe City. And I went with a friend to a couple, one of which we'll talk about in a moment. But after that one, actually, I ended up in Jam Jam. My friend was a bit tired. He'd gone home for a sleep. And I thought, well, I'm not going to miss this. And when I got to Jam Jam, it must have been certainly after 10 p.m. And I'd say with the exception of maybe Bossa in Hokkaido, it is probably the biggest of any of the places I've been. Like, it's down a staircase and it was absolutely cavernous, like huge place. And of course, when you come in the door, as you can see from one of the photos, if you're looking at the photos on tokyojazzjoints.com, it's sort of split into 2 sections. So when you get in, you're faced with this choice immediately of whether you go to the conversation seat or whether you go to the listening seat. And it wasn't really a choice that I had to make, because I was the only person in the whole place at this time of night, on top of which they played Ole Coltrane at ear-splitting volume. So I just sat there on my own in Kobe on what was probably like a Thursday night, listening to Coltrane at ear-splitting volume and thinking, I'm so glad I didn't miss out on this opportunity.
That's fantastic. I had a very different experience. I was in Kobe with my family, and this was a couple years back. I guess my kids were a little bit younger, but anytime we go anywhere, my wife is very understanding. She's like, okay, you've got 3 hours. Go. Don't come back too drunk. So, needless to say, I did come back drunk because after going to Jam Jam, I got there earlier in the night. I probably got there about 8:30 and had the exact same reaction to you. Cavernous is a great word because that's what it feels like. It's way down in the basement. I thought it had a little bit of a New York vibe to it, to be honest.
Yeah.
It was the kind of place that you'd find in New York City, in Brooklyn, these days especially. But what struck me at first, in addition to the very charming conversation seat and listening seat sign, was the volume. I mean, they were just cranking it up when I went in there. And this was earlier in the night. There were people, and there was probably about 10 to 15 people spread around. And it just amused me because right away I thought, like, it doesn't matter if you sit in the conversation seat. You can't talk with that volume, But everyone in there was into the music, you could tell. They were really grooving with it. I think they were not playing Coltrane. Who were they playing? It wasn't Eric Dolphy. Oh my God, who was it? It was another alto player somewhere along the lines of that. But I'll have to go back and find my old notes. But I remember thinking that, okay, if they're going to have this record at that volume at 8:30 at night, on a weeknight, that means that it's pretty uncompromising, that the music is what it's about here. They're not here just to make and sell a lot of drinks, So, I couldn't stay too long. As I said, I was trying to get around to a couple places, that night in the few hours that I had before going back to the hotel. But I did get a chance to talk with the couple that run it. Did you speak with them at all? You must have when asked permission to take the pictures, huh?
Yeah, I think briefly. I think we had a bit of a chat at the bar, and I as always, asked for permission to take the photos, but I don't remember having like a long conversation. I do remember leaving him a business card, I think, for the project, or one of the DM cards for different exhibitions and things like that. But yeah, I mean, like you say, it's funny because, I mean, they're all listening seats really when the volume is that loud. But again, just to reinforce the point, I suppose cavernous is one aspect of it. But of course, when you look at the photograph of the listening seats, you can see that they're all lined up towards the speakers. And we've mentioned this a few times now in different episodes. But if you ever wanted a more church, but not a church-like feel to a jazz place, I think it'd be hard to find one that fits it better than this. I mean, the speakers are up there at the end. They're sort of eerily lit in blue, like an altar. You have the amp, of course, in the middle, and then you've got these tables and stools that are doubling as... you've got these chairs and then these little stools that are doubling as tables lined up facing the speakers. And so there's definitely no ambiguity about what the purpose of that place is.
Oh yeah, and we have mentioned that many other places have that sort of seating arrangement, like you're in a club, basically, except the stage is the audio system. And it's interesting though, because I did spend about 10 or 15 minutes talking to the couple. Because I mentioned somebody who had recommended Jam Jam to me, somebody online who they kind of knew peripherally. So it was, a good way to sort of worm my way in and explain what my website was about and, why I went around to all these places when I was traveling. But they told me that they actually do events in there, not live events, but sort of a combination of DJ events and listening parties. I think we've mentioned on a few episodes how some cafes will have a listening party and it might be themed, So, for example, I just saw last night here in Japan, up in Sapporo, Igarashi-san, who is a jazz DJ and runs a curry shop. In his curry shop, he has listening parties. I mean, this is just so Japanese, right? So in his little curry restaurant, last night was John Coltrane listening night. Every month he picks a different artist, So that's something quite common. But at Jam Jam, they do it, but the DJ will be behind the decks and kind of almost like a live radio show, So the DJ's not just spinning the tunes, but sort of talking about them while he's playing them.
Cool.
And I thought like, oh, this would be a great environment for that because it's a big room. It's got a great sound system. The seats are really comfortable. I really want to attend one of those events. This kind of live, I don't know what you'd really call it. I mean, the closest thing I would think is it's like a live radio session.
What's less common perhaps is, which something we haven't seen very much of, is the huge poster and quotation from Che Guevara down at the far end above the speakers. We're more used to seeing maybe Coltrane or Miles Davis or Herbie Hancock down there, but interesting that was the choice of kind of, and very very clearly the only thing that's on the wall. So, it's obviously given a sort of pride of place.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I think we've spoken only a little bit about this, but for our listeners who are not familiar with Japan or Japanese culture, these days, very overt political displays are uncommon in everyday Japanese life. Even down to heated political discussions that you might have with, your friends in the bar or the pub or wherever. That kind of thing is much less common here. So I've always been surprised that some of the only places I've seen very direct political posters, or activist type flyers, has been in the jazz cafes. A lot of stuff about, and Philip, you can attest to this because you were here when the earthquake happened and the Fukushima nuclear plant was in danger of meltdown. And afterwards, there was a grassroots movement of young people and other groups to protest this. It got no media coverage at all in Japan, no mainstream media coverage at all. But I've seen the flyers for these kind of events in jazz spots. So I think the owners of the jazz cafes are a little bit more tuned into sort of that kind of maybe that remaining sort of 1960s culture we described when Japan was burning in the streets and the students would go to the jazz kiseten,
That's the thing, yeah. And I think, like you said, it's a reminder of the association between jazz and counterculture. And I think probably a lot of times, people have a particular image of jazz as being this very kind of smooth and sort of schmaltzy, kind of cheesy type of music. And of course, like we know that that's not the case, but it is also worth remembering, like a lot of these guys that run these places, and indeed the women owners as well, they grew up, many of them, in a very different time politically, and something that there was a lot more tumult around politics and that kind of culture. And so you go in there now and see these, aging owners and think, this old guy, this old girl that's running these places. But of course, in many ways they were possibly involved in that kind of counterculture. And even just as we said before, by their choice to run a jazz bar at night, in very antisocial hours, in a country where, very much the focus is on, towing the line and keeping your head down and playing the game and being acceptable in inverted commas. They really are pioneers and they're really out there and have made a very conscious choice to sort of exist outside the mainstream. So, yeah, it's not surprising, I suppose, in some ways that it is there and it is Che Guevara, but equally, like you say, it's we tend to see more jazz memorabilia as much as anything. So
yeah, for sure. But it's definitely, I think it's a place that I really loved, and I would like to go back and spend more time there. The next time I get down to the Kansai region, and it is, visually, spatially, just a very unique place. It doesn't look like anywhere else that we photographed. So if you are in the Kobe area, and Jam Jam is right next door to Chinatown. Kobe is sort of like the Yokohama of to Osaka's Tokyo. So Kobe's the port city. It's got a big Chinatown. It's got a big jazz scene, but it's very walkable. It's very, very walkable. It's not a large city, and you could easily hit, a couple of these places in between getting your Chinese noodles out. Now, Philip, the night that I was there, so, I mentioned I had a strict time limit to get back to the family. So after Jam Jam, I got a little lost looking for our next joint, which is a really beautiful small space called Goodman.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, and one of your pictures did capture that they have a periodic live schedule, of live gigs going on there. And that night, unfortunately, I walked right into the middle of a session. And so I got my pushy New York attitude on, and I just said, oh, look, I only came in to take a picture. Can I just come in and take a picture and have a quick beer? And unbelievably, the owner said yes. So I didn't have to pay the 4,000 yen. I mean, the gig was almost over. It was probably going to be another 15 minutes, you know. But I told him, I said, look, I'm just here on vacation. I'm from Tokyo area. I really love jazz places. Can I just come in for a drink, take a picture? He's like, yeah, come in. But it was very crowded. I didn't really get a chance to talk to him, and I didn't have much time. So I was happy to see that you got the pictures that you did when the place was pretty much empty. But I don't remember the story of when you did go there. Was this right before you left to go back to Ireland?
Well, it's funny you should say that it's empty, because actually some of them were taken afterwards. But as you can see from the two that feature the bass player, it was actually, there was a gig on that night as well. So we managed, I think, to get in and sneak somehow a couple of seats at the bar. So it was, in fact, before I went to Jam Jam. So there was two of us. I was with my friend, and we got a seat in at the bar, which allowed me to sort of photograph the musicians. So it seems maybe, I mean, even from the poster, it seems a fairly, well, it's a more than weekly occurrence that they have gigs on. So it's a pretty active place. And I do remember just being really busy and having a real kind of real vibe about it. You know, like there was a lot of people in there. It was a very mixed crowd. And they were all having a great time. You know, they were serving some food, obviously drinks as well. And it's funny because when you even just see the piano there, Goodman was one of those places where it had that kind of slick jazz bar feel to it, but also you can see from the instruments and, of course, the amazing selection of vinyl over there as well, that it kind of very much has a jazz kissa feel as well. And it was interesting. It felt much more of a bar, much more of a nighttime place.
Definitely a nighttime place. And we should mention that it's right in the heart of the nightlife district in Kobe. But it's in one of those kind of nondescript buildings. We've talked about it so many times in Japan that you go into this, regular looking concrete monstrosity, and there's just dozens and dozens of places to drink of all varieties, whether they're snack bars, hostess bars, or in goodness case, a jazz bar. Yeah. So, you take up this tiny elevator, into the landing, and then in the little hallway, there's, 4 or 5 other places. But you can hear the music coming out. So, it's no problem, easy to find. But your picture with the piano kind of captures it. It's just a square room with the lights in the ceiling, but they've got the great audio system. They've got the records. And I think having seen since then, they've got a pretty good presence online. They do. Yeah. They seem to use social media a lot, and they do have a lot of gigs. I think it's one of those places. It's a smaller club, but it's a place that people who are visiting the Kansai region, musicians, who visiting the Kansai region, are definitely going to go there for a gig.
Yeah, for the design nerds listening, I'd say the logo is definitely one of my favorite fonts. Again, one of those fonts that are all over Japan, where you could barely recreate it. If you wanted someone to make that for you now, they'd really struggle. Very analog vibe to it, and just a gorgeous typography. And I think somewhere in the piles of things, I have a couple of beer mats as well that I got that night. So yeah, really nice place. Glad I got to it. Glad we got in.
That you got, or that you
that I got.
happened to just walk out with.
Well, I mean, we're talking about paper beer mats. I mean, I don't think it's hardly a federal crime, is it?
Not the Nefertiti kind, the one that I'm using on my desk right now.
No, definitely not. No.
Okay. Well, it's funny you mentioned the font of the sign, because I'm actually so much more taken with the door that just says bar on it. I mean, that's I kind of like that. Like, if I ever my own place, I might do that. I'm just going to put bar on the door.
Yeah, it's very simple, isn't it? And like you say, you can hear the music, but there's nothing that indicates really, other than that it is a bar. And, if you look down the corridor from where you're standing, it would just be a plain white corridor, like something from The Shining. So, and there's so many of those places in Japan. And from the outside, so nondescript, so boring looking. And then you go in and, it contains these places that you can barely imagine. So beautiful place, beautiful spot. And so moving on from Kobe then, I guess, slightly prickly one, this, because again, if you've lived in Japan, you'll probably be aware of the gentle rivalry between Osaka and Tokyo. We're going to Osaka. Tokyo Jazz Trance goes to Osaka, and it actually worked out okay. There was no one waiting for us at the station. We didn't get duffed up. It was all okay. Again, we went to these two places separately. I went on a trip around Kansai with a friend before I left Japan, just to check out a few of these places, because probably, other than Tokyo, I guess, sort of Osaka, Kyoto, and that Kansai area is probably the highest concentration of jazz places. So it's definitely something. It's definitely somewhere that you want to be visiting if you're into that kind of jazz joint culture. So we're going to go to two places. The first of which we'll save the best to last, I think, or certainly the coolest to last for sure. The first place was a bit of an oddity, and I think probably, I don't know if you were familiar with it before I had been, but it was a place called Top Rank that actually, I think, is in the same building down below another better known jazz place. The outside door is very intriguing. It's covered with stickers, JBL logo, and different kinds of posters. And when you go in, it's really an incredible collection of sort of eclectic books and music. And I suppose in some ways the owner was quite a unusual character as well, right?
Well, I don't know. As you mentioned at the top, we've got, we're breaking protocol here, so we're going to be telling stories we have not shared with each other. So Tokyo Jazz Joints first. I went to Top Rank for the first time 10 years ago. Okay. Because, well, you mentioned the building, so let's set the scene. So we're in Osaka, which is an unbelievably dense city. Okay, and in the area called Namba, which is right in the center downtown near Dotonbori, where all the people go to eat and drink. You get any tourist photo that you see of Osaka will be in this neighborhood. With the lights and the big fish hanging out the shops and all of that. So there is a building. And it's called the Chuwa Dixie Building for some reason unknown. Chuwa Dixie Building, and it is every floor is a different music bar. The basement is a rock bar. The first floor is a kind of a shot bar with just jazz in the background, the kind of place you go for a cocktail to talk business. Then you get up to the second floor and you get to Top Rank. And you mentioned the amazing front door with all the stickers. For our non-reading Japanese listeners, many of whom are audiophiles, obviously you're going to know JBL and the Altec Lansing audio equipment. And under that, it's talking about the vacuum amps that he has, vacuum tube amps. So, you can tell already that this guy's going to have a serious sound system. It's all going to be all about the music. But when I went in, and of all the places that I've been to, when I started my website since 2007, and then over 150 places with you, Philip, the only person who ever said this to me was this guy. He said, if you can't speak Japanese, I can't serve you. And I was like speechless, man.
This is 10 years ago, right?
This was 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. I was speechless. I was just like, what the hell? Like, I've been going to jazz places all around the country, for years. And no one's ever said that. Certainly you've gotten the vibe of, oh no, it's a Western person and I don't speak English and they're kind of like nervous, or maybe they, you can sense a little bit of like nervousness about it when you walk in. But no one's ever been so direct to just say, can you speak Japanese? If not, I can't serve you. And I got my wits about me again and I said, no, I speak Japanese. And then he just smiled and he was like, oh, okay, go ahead and have a seat. And
perfectly acceptable.
And now it was like, what? So all I could imagine, I immediately had stories going through my head like, okay, he's in the middle of Osaka, touristy neighborhood. Maybe he had some bad experience with guys who came in and didn't know the music bar sort of protocol, or the seating charge or whatever, and had some trouble. Who knows? I didn't want to push him about it because I just felt like if I immediately go into that conversation, I'm not going to enjoy my time in this bar. And as your pictures captured, it's an absolutely gorgeous place.
Yeah.
Look at the plants, the pictures, the CDs, the books. I believe on the left side of your second photo there, that's a bottle of Bruichladdich whiskey from Scotland.
Yeah.
If I recognize that label. So Top Rank's pretty much got everything. And it's not even just jazz. There's a huge poster of Seiko Matsuda in the bathroom, and she's one of the major pop stars of the last 30 years in Japan. So I don't know if he plays her music, but he's got a big poster in there. So it was definitely a unique vibe, and so I'm curious to know what was the reaction when you guys walked in.
Well, I remember thinking he was a little odd, but I don't remember that conversation. Now, it may just have been that I came straight in and sort of went for ego to this guy or whatever, and that kind of maybe mitigated that, or possibly over the course of the 10 years he'd grown to love random Westerners walking in, even the ones that couldn't speak Japanese. I don't know, but he was very chatty. And in fact, actually, now I remember, we sat at the bar for a bit. I did explain the project, as you can see, because obviously I got the picture of him behind the bar. But I do remember the photograph of the gramophone that I took, the old Victrola gramophone. He got that out and played that for us. So he deliberately got that out. He wound it up. He got this. He chose the record and he put it on, and we just sat back and it was like, wow,
incredible.
We were both just blown away. So he was definitely more welcoming for whatever reason. I'm not suggesting. I would never suggest that it was just something to do with. I would never suggest it was just something to do with you having a more prickly personality, perhaps. But I mean, I don't know. Who knows what his backstory is? But
I thought it might have been the beard and the scraggly hair that just,
it could have been that. I was a lot more slick back. I was more slick back. So it may have been that. But I mean, you're right. Like it's just a gorgeous place. It's like a kind of a combination between like this really cozy living room and a shop. And they have this. There's this beautiful little set of speakers down at the far end with like a plant between them. And then also you've got this kind of like Balinese Hindu mask up there and the different kinds of fabric prints. And so it's just a really, really eclectic.
It's very much a hodgepodge. It almost feels like a store. You know what I mean? Like you go into one of these old, used book and vinyl stores that you have around Japan, and where they just have like tons of clutter for sale. You know, that's kind of what it feels like. I'm so happy that's
a bit harsh. That's a bit harsh. I mean, it's beautifully kept. Like, I mean, if it's a storeroom, it's got a lot of love and attention. I mean, look how gorgeously laid out it is. I mean, I bet you he can put his hand on anything. Well,
it's the randomness though, because there's so many random books, and I mean, look, above the bar you got the great portrait of him, and he's got the beef jerky, hanging up there. He's got some cans underneath. I don't even know what that is. Is it tuna or fish or something? It just has that amazingly cluttered feel. But no, it was a wonderful spot, and I think that the reason I never went back. Because for several years, I was going down to Osaka yearly in the summertime, and sometimes even in the wintertime, twice a year. So I would always hit Lush Life in Kyoto, and I would always hit the music building, the Chuwa Dixie Music Building, but would always go to the place upstairs after my experience with him. So I didn't even catch his name, but now that you said that, next time I'm down there, I'm going to go back, and maybe, you know what, maybe he was just having a bad night. Who knows? You know,
I feel like your assessment of the place is maybe tainted slightly by your traumatic experience.
No, it is a gorgeous place. And remember, like, what's incredible is that this building, so we've mentioned, it's five floors of music bars, all of them ostensibly competing with each other, but they each have a different vibe. The three so-called jazz spots are very, very different. So from Top Rank, you go up to the third floor, and it's Bird 56. So this time, you tell me first, what was your impression of Bird?
Well, hang on. Sorry, are we skipping over Fannie Mae? Because I mean, again, as if we haven't made the point enough times. But not only do you have these two incredible jazz bars in the same building, you've also got a dedicated Rolling Stones and blues bar in the basement. So, time and time again, you just have the scale and extent of these bars and the dedication of like owners to a particular type of music or culture is just astonishing. And, to have, in some cities, to have those 5 bars at all would be something worth boasting about. But like the fact that 5 of those are crammed in that one building, I just think is astonishing. And
it's known as the Osaka Music Building. If you want to read a little bit more about that, you can look up my website, Tokyo Jazz Site. I have an article on there about it that I wrote years back. I never went into Fannie Mae just because I thought, if this is a Stones and blues bar, I'm going to be getting the drinks out. And by the time I move up to top rank and then make it to bird by the end of the night, it could get a little bit ugly. So I just decided not to go in. Every time I go back there, I just stick with bird.
I don't know if it would be your speed anyway.
Hey, I'm a big blues guy.
I know, but
connection.
If you were going in with those fabric print shirts and that bag swinging about, I think you might have been ejected before you got to order a drink.
You are so jealous of my blue bag. You mention it quite often. It's one of the best bags I've ever owned. It's lasted for like years. Not even a tear in it. Yeah.
We'll make sure to post pictures of that bag on social media just in case anyone's interested.
Check the TJJ Instagram feed tomorrow for that one.
Delving deeper. So, so let's finish up with Bird 56. And luckily, we don't have far to go, so we just go up the stairs. Again, Bird 56. So I think, again, weirdly, we've talked about them in one order, but actually went to them in the reverse order. So I think I went to 56 first, and I hadn't been aware of top rank when I went down there. And then, of course, coming down the stairs past it and thought, well, of course I'm going to go in here. Look at this place. But my goal that evening had definitely been Bird 56. And I think we'd got off the Shinkansen and maybe dropped some bags and gone straight there, or even gone straight there. And as you can see, again, from the pictures, I timed it in such a way that that there would be no one there, or it would just opened. And again, for me, this is one of those places, at the risk of sort of boring the listeners and repeating myself, but I think, as if that hasn't already happened, I think this is one of those places that fits into that. It's like the Osaka version of Downbeat almost. It's just, it's kind of woody, it's kind of smoke stained. It's got these old stickers and posters that have been up there for years. It's got these little handwritten signs that, that one that Everyday Open immediately reminds me of the John Coltrane listening sessions in Downbeat. And I just, and also it's got this really interesting combination of Miles Davis in the toilet with the SM Bondage dance party flyers. So,
I was wondering if you were going to mention that. But
I mean, not to mention that incredible ashtray, which I think is in the bathroom with all the different jazz record labels on it.
Yeah, I wanted that one so much.
It's just a gorgeous place. I mean, and again, the owner was very kind, very welcoming, lovely guy. I mean,
Natori-san. Yeah, Natori-san.
Amazing.
So, as I mentioned, the first time I went there was 10 years ago, and I loved birds so much that every trip back to Osaka for work or with family, I would always stop by there. It was funny because the first time I went in, he had different glasses on. He had the same hat, but the different glasses he was wearing made him look almost identical to a well-known Japanese TV celebrity who's on one of these boring news programs named Teddy Ito. So that made me giggle. But the amazing thing was when I sat down to talk with him, he was like, "You speak Japanese?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he proceeded to speak to me for about 20 minutes straight. And I could barely understand him because he had an incredibly thick Osaka accent.
That's right. Yeah.
The Osaka dialect, when it's really, really strong, is almost like a different language with different verb endings and different inflections and pronunciations. So the combination of this old guy's accent and then the music being very loud, I lost track of the conversation after a couple minutes. And it was really funny because I was sitting at the bar and there was a regular there, and he started to get a smile on his face, and he finally said, "Master, I don't think the honorable foreigner can understand you," which was really just like the way he said it was hysterical. And he was like, "What do you mean he doesn't understand? He speaks Japanese." And the regular was like, "Yeah, but you're speaking in Kansai Ben." They call it Kansai Ben, the Osaka dialect. And I had to confess. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Natori-san. Yeah, I'm not catching everything. I'm a little bit new with the Osaka accent." And so he slowed it down and spoke a little more straight ahead Japanese for me the rest of the night. But we had a great chat. And you mentioned the great, very worn out picture near the door that says "open every day." I mean, he means that. I asked him, I was like, "Are you really open every day of the year?" And he said, "Oh yeah. I haven't, I've taken about 3 days off in the last 15 years when I was feeling pretty sick."
That's the religious life for you.
other than that, I'm here. And I said, wow, doesn't it get ever, do you ever feel a little claustrophobic or that you want to go take a trip somewhere? And he was like, well, it's really good now because I have my laptop here and I've discovered on YouTube you can see a lot of these interesting travel documentaries. So the other day I saw something about the nature in the Amazon in Brazil, and I'd always wanted to go to Brazil. So I feel like now I can travel, via the internet while I'm in the jazz bar. So it's not so bad. And I just thought, wow, amazing. The guy's just a superstar, man. He's literally living in the bar, and he's been open since 70. Well, he told me he'd been there 35 years, which would have made it the late 70s, but the sign on the bar says 72. So I'm assuming he took it over from the first owner. But think about that, 35 years, every day of the year, except when you were sick 2 or 3 times, you've gone to open the bar.
It's like a sort of performance art, really, isn't it? It's astonishing, really, when you think about it. And that in many ways reflects a lot of Japan, but I suppose it appeals to us because he's running a jazz bar, not working in a sort of some company or, some awful place. But it's a gorgeous, like from a photography point of view for me, it's hard to take a bad photograph in there. It's beautiful. The lighting is gorgeous. And, even that neon sign, Bird 56, with this huge poster of Marilyn just before you go into the toilets. Like, it's really beautiful. Like, there's no other way to describe it. Even the varnished pictures in the bathroom. This kind of collage, like to recreate something like that would be so difficult. It's just something that has that kind of vibe just comes over years. You just can't. You can tell when it's been forced, and here it's like, no, this just happened over time. So, that photo's a little scratched. I'll just like glue another one on top of it. You know, like I won't even bother to make it line up. And you can feel the years in there, but in a really good way. I'm curious just about, and I'm going to get really jazz nerdy for a second, but I didn't ask him why it's called Bird 56. Bird obviously is Charlie Parker, who died in 1955. So I'm wondering, there must be some significance to that maybe just is going over our heads. But definitely next time in Osaka, I will ask about that. He did tell me, and I can't remember, although just looking here, that the Charlie Parker story was released by Savoy Records in 56. So unless that might be one of the reasons why. But I do remember asking him because it's confusing because first of all, you think, it was open in 56. And I remember just saying that off the top of my head to someone. And then they were like, no, it says on the tambourine 1972. And I was like, oh, yeah. So it might be something to do with that. But interestingly as well, just from like a really sort of nerdy point of view, and just going back to the design of some of these places or incidental design, but I guess this is deliberate. I don't know if you've noticed that he always writes the A upside down.
You're right. I did know
Isn't that funny? It's not just the place. So it's in the proper logo on the door. It's also in the wooden sign, but even down below where it says coffee/bar, also the A is upside down. So
is it there too? Wait, let me see.
So I don't know if he's signaling to some secret jazz society, and we're just not getting it. But
I didn't realize that was on the little chalkboard there.
Isn't that cool?
That's unbelievable.
You don't really notice it too. It's very, very subtle, but nice little touch there anyway. But again, one of those places I think, when it closes, it's going to be tragic because...
Oh, no, I don't even want to think about it. I looked up before we recorded tonight, it said open. I wonder what he's thought about the whole COVID-19 situation. This guy wouldn't give a flying F about that, I think. I think he'd probably just be like, I'm fine. I'm going to come in anyway. By the way, I've got to ask, the portrait of him is wonderful. Did you try any of the very attractive looking snacks that are behind the counter?
I knew you'd pick up on that. No, I don't. Well, I'm not as precious as you, so I'm pretty sure I must have eaten something. And probably at that point, we'd come off the train, not had dinner yet. So I imagine I was starving, but I probably scoffed some nuts or something. But... Yeah, I mean, I don't remember particularly what it was.
I declined the offer, obviously. But I was also interested, the way he's got the liquor above them in that kind of like English pub style, where they hang them upside down. You just hold the glass up to get your shot. I've never seen that in a jazz bar before. You don't really see that in Japan very often.
No, that's true, actually. Yeah.
I think in Japan they're always really big. We've talked a lot about how presentation and aesthetics are very, very important in Japan, especially in a lot of the bars. So the look of the bottles on the counters is always like carefully considered.
Yeah.
And here he's got them in the upside down way. I thought that was really interesting. But I mean, Bird's not a place, again, you're not going to go there to eat. Some of that stuff looked like it was there since 1972 and they opened. But one other thing that Natori-san told me, which was really interesting, getting back to him being there every day, I said, what about the live gigs though? Like, how did you go to gigs back in the day? And he was like, well, to be honest, when I opened a bar, I couldn't afford to go to any shows. I mean, they were pretty expensive. And especially for the foreign acts who came, people who were students or young Japanese fans, you'd have to save up a lot to go to one of these gigs. So I could barely make a living in the bar. So I've actually never even seen a lot of these people play live. And that was a really different comment to what we've heard, because we've talked a lot about how many of the Kisaten owners around the country acted as sort of promoters, where they would be the ones to help promote the gigs, design the posters, and in some senses, sometimes even bring the band to drink in the places afterwards. We've seen pictures of that, But for some reason in Osaka, Natori-san was never able to do that. I kind of felt sad about that too, because he seemed to say like, yeah, I missed out on a lot of great gigs over the years here.
Yeah. Well, look, that's our 4 places for today. And again, all great places in their own right, and not necessarily headline places either. I know some of them I have exhibited in the past in exhibitions. Bird 56 has definitely made it in there, and so has Goodman. And just on that note, maybe a shout out to Charlie in London, who put on an event about a couple of years ago, nearly now it was, called Moonglow, where he kind of set up a pop-up jazz bar, and we printed quite a few of the photos for that, and they kind of form part of the decor for this 1 month long project. So shout out to him, and it reminds me of, I think, Bird 56, the Marilyn image was definitely in there. And I know also the Goodman double bass image was in there too. So yeah, big supporter of the project, and always very enthusiastic about everything that we do and post and stuff. So shout out to him. James, any big plans for the week?
No. As you like to say, if you're listening to this in a very distant and different future, this will just be an historical footnote. But basically, we're a bit kind of entering a mini lockdown again here in the Tokyo area with the rise in number of infected people of coronavirus. So rather than the opening of the Tokyo Olympics, which was supposed to happen tomorrow, we're on a 4-day weekend of nothing happening at all. And you know what? It's not too bad, Philip. I'm catching up on a lot of music stuff and hanging out with the family and, recording some podcasts. So,
well, fingers crossed that I'll make it back to Tokyo and Japan before the Olympics is rescheduled, if indeed it ever is, because it seems like certainly the appetite to do that is waning in Japan. But I'd love to make it back over there before that, and so Well,
ideally, you'll come back and the Olympics still won't go on, so we can have the best of both worlds. Because
the ideal situation.
Nobody at this point wants it to happen. So, but always good to chat with you. I'm so happy we got to talk about the Kansai places. I forgot about how good they were. So this was great.
Well, next week we're back in Tokyo for another one of our Deep Cuts episodes, episode 21. We're going to be going to a few, certainly one of my favorite experiences ever in the project. So look forward to that. If you haven't listened to all the episodes already and you're not listening consecutively, please go back in. There's another 19 episodes you haven't heard. And we hope you enjoyed last week's episode as well, with the extended interview with Dr. Aizawa formerly of Toru Aizawa Quartet, who released the legendary Tachibana album. Listen, James, look after yourself this week. In the meantime, stay safe and enjoy yourself.
You too. Take it easy, man. Talk to you soon.
See ya.